Have you ever looked at someone and judged them by what they wear, the job they hold, or the way they speak, only to realize later they carried a story far greater than you could ever imagine? In a quiet corner of an exclusive Boston club, a black waitress refused to serve a billionaire CEO. Guests froze. Whispers spread. Some said she was rude. Others thought she'd just thrown her life away. But no one knew the truth, that behind her calm eyes was a past filled with brilliance, loss, and an extraordinary secret that could change everything. Imagine this. You once stood at the top of the world, then lost it all: your career, your identity, your child. Years later, life places you face to face with the very man who took it all from you. Do you serve him with a smile, or do you finally let the truth speak for itself? What would you do if your past knocked at the door, demanding justice not through anger, but through courage? This is not just a story about science or success. It's about dignity, about a woman who refused to be defined by what the world saw, and instead reminded the world who she truly was. Stay with me, because what happens next will change the way you look at people forever. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story that reminds us of the power of humanity. The sound of crystal glasses clinking softly against each other rang out like a bell in the room filled with the pale yellow light of noon. At the Metropolitan Circle, everything exuded luxury and power. Every thick velvet curtain, every silver thread on the tablecloth, all gave the feeling that this was not a place for ordinary people. In the far corner of the room, Amara Johnson set down a silver tray, her hands steady and precise like someone who had been doing this for a decade. The clock on the wall read exactly 12:30 p.m., the hour when the city's most powerful people came to dine and discuss the business that rocked global markets. She wore a white uniform shirt, the cuffs neatly folded, and black trousers pressed. Nothing special. But her eyes, deep and calm, shone with something else, not obedience, but understanding. People often overlooked this, because in this world, the gaze of a waiter was rarely of interest to anyone. At a large table in the middle of the room, a group of men were chatting animatedly. Laughter and confident words echoed like coins dropping to the stone floor. At the center was Ethan Cole, CEO of Helios Systems, a man Fortune magazine called the new symbol of tech power. His gray suit could have cost a waiter a month's salary. Ethan glanced around, his gaze landing on Amara pouring water for another table. He raised his hand, signaling, "Hey, you, the lady over there, could you serve our table next?" Amara heard, but did not come over immediately. She finished her work, dried her hands, and then came forward. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, her voice soft but clear. Ethan put down his glass of wine and tilted his head to look at her, as if to test whether she was skillful enough to be worthy of serving his table. "We'd like you to take care of our table from now on. The previous waiter's too slow." Amara was silent for a few seconds. Inside, she felt a small wave rising, a feeling both familiar and foreign. She raised her head, looking straight at him. "I'm afraid I can't do that, sir." The air froze. A few nearby diners looked up, half surprised, half excited. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." "You can't." She kept her eyes calm, but her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from long-suppressed anxiety. "Another server will take care of your table shortly. I won't be the one serving you today." The remark was like a pebble thrown into a calm lake. The ripples spread quickly, reaching every gaze. The bar manager froze, and several other members of Helios Systems looked at each other in confusion. Ethan smiled, a cold, mocking smile. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Amara replied softly. "Yes, sir, I do." That was all it took to quiet the noisy room. At the next table, a businesswoman stopped typing on her phone. The background jazz suddenly became clearer, each note drawn out, slow and breathless. Ethan Cole was used to being waited on, to hearing "yes, sir" all the time. He had never been refused, especially by a black woman in a waitress uniform. He leaned back in his chair, looking her up and down. "So you're refusing to serve me?" "For what reason?" Amara looked straight ahead, her voice low, but each word measured. "Because, Mr. Cole, some things don't deserve to be served." No one understood what she meant, but the way she said it made the air thick. An awkward silence fell over the seats. Ethan pursed his lips, his eyes flashing with annoyance. He turned to his colleague and said half jokingly, half contemptuously, "Guess some people think pouring water makes them philosophers." A small laugh rang out, broken and forced. Amara did not leave immediately. She merely nodded, a slight breeze, and walked toward the counter. As she faded away, Ethan felt something was wrong, not because of the rejection, but because of that look, the look of someone who knew exactly who they were looking at and knew exactly what was coming. Behind the counter. Amara stood still for a few seconds. She felt the chill of the air conditioning, heard the clink of glass, the sound of high heels fading on the stone floor. Her heart was pounding, but not from fear. She had been preparing for this moment for years, the moment when the past, thought dormant, began to stir. She said softly to herself, low enough for only herself to hear it begins again. As Amara turned away from Ethan's table, the room seemed to freeze for a few seconds. A few of the guests tried to pretend they didn't hear anything, continuing to cut into their steaks, but their eyes were furtively following the woman in the black and white uniform as she walked by. Her shoes echoed evenly on the marble floor. Each step seemed to bring a strange wind. She passed the bar, where 3 bartenders were whispering. They weren't speaking loudly, but she caught a few words. She really said no to him. "The Ethan Cole man. She's crazy or something." One of them chuckled. It wasn't loud, but in that luxurious space, it was sharp as metal against glass. Amara didn't respond, nor did her expression change. She was used to those sounds. It wasn't the first time she'd been the subject of small, judgmental conversations. She just kept walking, her hand lightly touching the edge of the tray, out of habit, to steady her heartbeat. Across the room, the manager, Mr. Charles Bennett, tall, thin, bald, hurried over. He tried to smile, but his voice was shaking. "Amara, you know what I'm going to say. What just happened? It was Ethan Cole." "I know. Charles. You know, and you still say no. Do you want me to lose my job?" She looked up at him, her eyes neither resisting nor submitting. "I will take responsibility. No one will lose their job because of me." Charles sighed. He looked at her, about to say something more, but then just shook his head. "Okay, I'll tell you. People like him. Don't forget." When he left, Amara remained standing. From her position at the bar, she could see the corner of the table where Ethan sat. He was talking to his team, but every now and then his gaze would glance her way. It was no longer curious, but cold, calculating, and a little arrogant. The same gaze she had seen 8 years ago in the glass conference room on the 32nd floor of Helios Systems. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The images of that day came flooding back the long table, the harsh white light, and Ethan's face as he announced that he would completely take over the project she had founded. Luminar Quantum will now be a division of Helios Systems, he said coolly, the contract still in her hand. With one word, she lost everything. Her name was removed from the patent license. What she had built in 4 years gone as if it had never existed. Now, standing here, just a few tables away from him, she saw the same look in his eyes, a look that believed that power allowed him to define other people's worth. A younger waitress ran over. "Amara, Table 5 needs more water. Table 9 needs a change of napkins." "Yes, I'll take care of it." She smiled, a light smile, enough to reassure him. No one knew that there was an undercurrent going on in her mind at this moment. About 15 minutes later, Ethan got up from his desk to answer the phone. As he passed the counter, he paused for a few seconds. "You're brave. I'll give you that," he said, his voice tinged with sarcasm. "But you just made a career mistake you can't fix." Amara looked at him, tilting her head slightly. "I've made bigger mistakes before, sir." "Like what? Trusting the wrong man?" Ethan frowned, but she turned away, picking up the silver tray as if the conversation had never happened. Outside the glass window, the sky was gray. The last rays of sunlight slid down the row of houses opposite, spreading on the stone floor like broken pieces of gold. For a moment, she saw her reflection in the glass, a black woman in her 40s, her face calm, but her eyes filled with deep fatigue. In her mind, she heard her son Malik's voice echoing from her memory mom. "Why don't you go back to technology? You taught me that intelligence is a gift from God." She replied, "There are gifts, son, that should be hidden until the world knows how to appreciate them." Now, when she saw Ethan Cole, she realized that the other world had not changed much. A moment later, Ethan's table asked for the check. Another waiter brought the check. Ethan signed quickly, then left with his group. But before he headed out the door, he paused, looked around, and caught Amara's eye. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No words, but in that look was the past, and a silent challenge. As the door closed behind them, Charles came back. "They're gone. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I don't know what happened between you and him, but I've never seen anyone look Ethan Cole in the eye like that." Amara smiled faintly. "It's nothing. It's just that sometimes people need to remember they are still human, not gods." She cleared the counter, stacked the glasses, each movement slow. In her head, all the sounds gradually faded, leaving only her own heartbeat. The afternoon passed like this. The customers gradually left. The laughter gradually faded, leaving only a few waiters wiping down the tables. When the clock on the wall pointed to 5, Amara took off her apron, hung it on a hook, put on a thin coat, and walked out. The early fall air was cool. The wind carried the smell of coffee and car exhaust from the avenue. She walked slowly back to her small apartment in South Boston. The street was crowded, but in her mind there was a strange silence. She stopped in front of the used bookstore and looked through the dusty glass. In the glass case was an old science magazine titled "The Future of Quantum AI." The first name on the cover was hers, Amara Johnson, 2012. Below, in smaller print, Helios Systems Research Team. She stared at the words, feeling a tightness in her chest. Mine, but not mine anymore, she thought to herself. As she turned away, the phone in her pocket vibrated a text from Malik. "Mom, the scholarship came through. I got it. Thank you for believing in me." She smiled slightly. "It's all worth it," she whispered. But in the depths of her eyes, there was still the light of an old flame, a flame that had never gone out. She looked up at the darkening sky. A thought flashed through her mind, clear, calm, and unquenchable. It was time to take back what was hers. That night, Boston was unusually quiet. On the 5th floor of her small apartment, Amara sat by the window, the streetlights illuminating her face. On the table was a worn notebook, bound in brown leather, its writing faded by time. She flipped through the pages, her handwriting small and even, filled with formulas, diagrams, and symbols that only those in the quantum world could understand. Between the lines, there were soft handwritten sentences, as if to herself, "Never let fear define your worth." Outside, a breeze rustled the curtains. Malik wasn't home yet, probably still studying in the library. Amara took a deep breath, her hand gently touching the old photo on the table, a photo of her in 2014 in a dark blue suit, smiling brightly at the launch of Luminar Quantum, the company she founded. Memories flooded back. She remembered her first morning in the small office she rented in Cambridge, barely 400 square feet, but full of energy. 3 young engineers, a whiteboard covered with formulas, and a dream to turn quantum technology into a tool for human life, not a weapon. Ethan Cole was her investment advisor, the first person to believe in her. He was calm, had a slight smile, and spoke in short, convincing sentences. "We're going to change the world, Amara, and you're going to lead the way." She believed it then. For 3 years they worked together. She was the soul of the project, he the financial pioneer. She remembered nights they stayed in the lab until 2 a.m, listening to jazz music and talking about the future. Ethan had a way of saying anything was possible. Then came the day the company secured a multi-million-dollar investment, Helios Systems. Ethan told her it was Luminar Quantum's chance to go global. Amara sat for a long time that night, considering every line of the contract. She had heard of Helios, the giant company known for swallowing up small startups. But Ethan promised to protect her. "I will never let them take your work." "Amara," he said, "you have my word." She believes. The contract was signed. 3 months later, Helios officially took over Luminar Quantum. The old office changed its name, and the staff was gradually transferred. She retained her position as senior technical advisor, but no longer had control over her own projects. Then one morning, she received an email from the legal department. Her name had been removed from the list of co-patent holders of the Entangled Harmony Protocol technology. The reason given simply transfer of intellectual property pursuant to the contract. Amara read the line over and over again, her hands shaking. She called Ethan, but the call never went through. The next day, he disappeared into the busy schedule of a new CEO. She joined him at Helios headquarters. The conference room door opened, and he was standing talking to the board. When he saw her, he frowned slightly. "Amara, not now. I promised. I'll do what's best for the project. Don't let your emotions ruin your future." "Emotions?" She chuckled, her voice cracking. "Your future is this project." Ethan turned away, speaking softly but coldly. "That future is Helios's now." After that conversation, she left the company. The press wrote that she left to pursue personal research, and Ethan was hailed as a pioneer of the commercial quantum era. In the months that followed, everything seemed to collapse. No more income, no more fame. She applied to research institutes, but the rejections were the same, not suitable for the current orientation. They didn't say it directly, but she understood. In a world where power is money, a black woman against a billion-dollar corporation has no second chance. Malik was 12 years old at the time. He'd seen his mother lie awake many nights, sitting silently in front of a dark screen. One morning, he handed her a piece of paper with a sketch of the two of them standing side by side. "Mom and me," he said, "even if you lose your job, I still have you." She cried, for the first time in years. Time passed. She looked for part-time jobs, eventually landing a waitressing position at the Metropolitan Circle. The work was easy, the pay was good, and most importantly, no one recognized who she was. In her black apron, she felt safe. There, she could quietly observe the world without getting hurt again. Sometimes, while washing glasses, she heard businessmen talking about innovation and leadership. Someone mentioned Ethan Cole, praising him as a legend. Every time she did, she just smiled. A small smile, enough to hide the pain in her heart. Then today, fate brought him to her table again. The moment she saw him in his silver-gray suit among the laughing crowd, she knew the past could no longer lie dormant. Amara closed the book and looked out the window. The cars were still rushing by on the street below, their yellow lights creating long streaks of light. She felt a void in her heart, but underneath that void was a smoldering fire. She didn't want revenge. What she wanted was the truth. She wanted to reclaim her name, her work, and most of all, to prove to her son that justice, however slow, could come. The phone rang, Malik's name on the screen. "Mom, I'll be home late. We'll have dinner after our study group." "Yeah, make sure you eat something hot." "Mom, I read the news about Helios. They said the Q Bridge project had a major error. They lost almost $1 billion. Amara paused, a faint smile on her lips. "Yeah, I heard. This world has its own rules. Honey, when people use knowledge to make money and forget the original reason, the system will collapse. You talk as if you know what they're doing. I'm just guessing." When the call ended, Amara sat for a while longer. Under the yellow light, her face no longer looked tired. She stood up and took out a small USB drive from the drawer. EH1 prototype was engraved on it. It was the original copy of the entangled harmony protocol that she had kept for the past 8 years. She stroked it gently, whispering as if to herself, "Maybe it's time." The next morning, the sky over Boston was a pale gray. The air carried the scent of roasted coffee and the steam from the streets that had rained the night before. Amara left for work earlier than usual. Her steps were slow, but steady. In her jacket pocket, a small USB drive engraved with the letters EH1 tapped lightly against her chest, making a slight jingle as it moved, a reminder that the past was still there, never gone. The Metropolitan Circle was quiet in the morning, save for a few waiters clearing tables and wiping down windows. Charles, the manager, stood at the counter checking the reservations for the day. When he saw Amara, he nodded. "There's a Helios Systems luncheon today. About a dozen people. Sitting in the main room. Ethan Cole will be in the lead." He paused, glancing at her briefly. "Would you like me to switch shifts?" Amara smiled. "No need." "Charles, I will serve them." He looked at her for a few more seconds, then sighed softly. "I just hope nothing happens today." She just nodded slightly, saying nothing more. Around noon, The Helios Systems team entered. Dark suits, shiny watches, and the scent of expensive perfume filled the air. Ethan Cole was at the head, his face still confident and slightly cold. Beside him was Dr. Olivia Grant, the research director, who had appeared with him in television interviews. Amara walked over to the table, set down the water pitcher and crystal cup, and bowed slightly. "Welcome to the Metropolitan Circle. Would you like to start with coffee or tea?" Her voice was calm, casual, as if nothing had happened yesterday. Ethan looked at her for a few seconds. He smiled faintly. "Coffee. Black. Just like yesterday." "Right." A small chuckle drifted across the table. Amara didn't respond. "Yes, sir." She turned away, walking toward the counter. Inside, her heart was beating slowly but strongly. She knew what was coming. Returning to the table, she set the coffee down in front of him, then took a step back, silent. The meal began. They talked about numbers, charts, and a problem that gradually became heavy in the air. The Q-Bridge project. "It's been 3 months and it's still not stable." "Doctor," Olivia said wearily, "the qubits lose coherence after 7 milliseconds. We can't maintain the quantum state long enough to run the algorithm safely." Ethan tapped his fingers on the table, his eyes strained. "We've burned almost $1 billion on this project. The council is losing patience. I want solutions, not excuses. We are using a standard surface error structure, but the environmental noise is uncontrollable." "Doctor," Olivia replied. Amara stood a few feet away, tray in hand, listening quietly, each word about coherence, error correction, and surface code sparked a spark in her memory. The equations flashed in her mind as clearly as images on a screen. She knew they were making a fundamental mistake. They were trying to isolate qubits instead of taking advantage of their connections. It was like trying to stop the wind with your hands instead of building a windmill. Ethan said, his voice low. "I hear IBM and Google have the same problem, but at least they're making progress. We've got nothing but useless, thick reports." A young engineer chimed in. "Maybe we should try a topological qubit approach like Luminar Quantum did back then." The name made Amara pause. Ethan raised his head, his eyes slightly annoyed. "Luminar Quantum. Don't mention that. That project is dead." Amara couldn't stop herself. She whispered, almost unconsciously, "It's not dead. Topological codes can protect the qubit state if designed with the right braiding structure." The table fell silent. Ethan slowly turned to look at her. "Doctor?" Olivia looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "What did you say?" Amara took a deep breath, knowing she couldn't back down. "I said, qubits can be protected by topological braiding. If you're still fighting decoherence, then you might as well be fighting nature instead of working with it." A few people laughed. "You're a waitress." "Right." Where did you read that? Ethan crossed his arms and tilted his head. "Interesting theory. Did you pick that up from YouTube too?" Amara kept her eyes level. "I've worked with systems like that. Maybe you're going about it the wrong way." The room went tense. "Dr." Olivia raised an eyebrow, looking straight at her. "You sound like you understand quantum error correction." "I not only understand," Amara replied softly, "I've written about it." A dry laugh rang out. Ethan leaned back, a mocking smile spreading across his lips. "Do you know who you're talking to? This is Helios Systems' top research team, and you're a waitress." Amara was silent for a few seconds. There was a strange light in her deep black eyes, the light of someone who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. "Yes, I am a waitress, but that doesn't mean I've forgotten what I used to create." The atmosphere was so heavy that the waiter at the next table stopped working. A few guests in the room looked their way. "Doctor—" Olivia leaned forward, her voice slowing. "What do you mean?" "Creative," Amara replied calmly. 8 years ago, I developed an algorithm called entangled harmony. Some people call it EH1. It can solve the problem you are having." Ethan's face changed color. He stood up, his voice low. "Enough. I don't want to hear any more of your delusions." "But Dr." Olivia kept her gaze fixed on her. "EH1. I've seen that name in Helios's archives, but no one knows the origin." Amara smiled slightly. A sad smile. "Now I know." Ethan stepped forward, his voice harsh. "What are you implying? That you developed it?" Amara looked at him, unblinking. "I wasn't implying anything. I was just stating the truth." Silence. All eyes were on them. For a few seconds, the air was so thick that the ticking of the clock on the wall could be heard. Ethan took a deep breath, then laughed, trying to regain his cool demeanor. "That's an interesting story. Thank you for sharing. But remember, you're here to serve me, not teach me quantum physics." She bowed slightly. "Of course, sir." She turned away, but as she reached the counter, her insides burned. She knew Ethan realized something. He wasn't angry at being challenged. He was afraid that she still had what Helios had stolen. Lunch ended in awkward silence. As the Helios crew left, Ethan didn't look back, but Dr. Olivia did. The look was different, not contemptuous, but questioning. That afternoon, while Amara was washing glasses, Charles approached. "Are you okay? I hear it was stressful." Amara smiled. "I'm fine. Sometimes the truth needs to be told, even just once." Charles was silent for a moment, then asked softly, "Are you related to them?" She looked out the window, where the late afternoon sun was painting the city a pale orange. "More than they think." That afternoon, it rained in Boston. Not heavily, just small drops that fell as steadily as the breathing of a person trying to stay calm. In the staff lounge of the Metropolitan Circle, Amara sat on a wooden chair by the window, her hands clutching a steaming mug of ginger tea. Her uniform still smelled of coffee and the perfume of her clients. The heavy after-lunch air lingered. She closed her eyes, listening to the raindrops on the glass roof. Each drop seemed to bring back images from the past few hours. Ethan's cold gaze, the half-sarcastic, half-contemptuous laughter of those who had called her waitress. She had no regrets, but the ache in her chest still lingered. Charles knocked and entered. He looked at her, worried. "I heard. They say Ethan Cole left without a word." Amara put her cup down on the table and nodded. "That's better. You know what kind of man he is. It's not easy to mess with power like that. I didn't mean to mess with it. I just said what I had to say." Charles looked at her for a long time. There was a mixture of admiration and fear in his eyes. He sighed softly and left. When the door closed, the only sound in the room was the sound of rain and the steam of hot tea. The phone in her pocket buzzed. It was from Malik Mom. "I saw the video. They filmed you talking to that CEO. It's going viral." Amara's heart sank. She opened her phone and saw a short clip of just over a minute filmed secretly from the table across from her. In the video, her voice was clearly heard. "I've worked with systems like this. Maybe you're going about it the wrong way." Then came the image of Ethan standing up, looking annoyed. Within hours, the video had gone viral, accompanied by sensational headlines. "Black Waitress lectures Tech Billionaire over lunch." Who's really the smarter person in the room? The comments below were divided. Some laughed at her, saying she was talking nonsense to get attention. Others praised her for daring to speak the truth. Amara read a few lines, then quietly turned off the screen. She didn't need anyone to defend her, nor did she need anyone to pity her. She came home late that night. Malik waited at the kitchen table, his eyes worried. "Mom, they said you might get fired. Is that true?" Amara smiled, stroking her son's head. "If you get fired, I'll find another job. Don't worry, but I read that you're a scientist. Is that true?" "Mom." The question made her pause. She looked at her son, her eyes clear and trusting. For a moment, she wanted to say it all, but then she just smiled slightly. "You have an exam tomorrow, right? Focus on that first." Malik was silent. "But when she turned away," he said softly, "if they ever took anything from you, I hope you take it back." That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on the glass. Ethan's voice, Dakar, Olivia's voice, and 1,000 old memories replayed in her mind. She wondered if she had done the right thing by saying it, but then she knew. There were moments when the truth had to be told, no matter the cost. The next morning, she arrived at the shop earlier than usual. But when she entered, Charles was waiting for her, his face solemn. "Amara, I just got a call from Helios's office. They asked the management to send the camera footage from yesterday. And what did you do? I haven't." "But I will." Amara looked at him, nodding slightly. "Thank you for telling me." As she was about to leave, Charles grabbed her arm. "Amara, I don't know what's going on between you and Ethan Cole, but one thing is clear. He's scared of you." She smiled slightly, a sad smile. "People are afraid of the truth. Charles, not of me." That afternoon, the restaurant was unusually crowded. Many people came just to see the waiter in the video. There were a few admiring glances, a few scrutinizing glances, and many undisguised whispers. She remained calm, serving each table, smiling at the right times, but inside her, small waves were rising, bit by bit. As she carried the empty tray back to the counter, a woman in a cream-colored suit approached. She wasn't a regular. She had brown hair, bright eyes, and the confident demeanor of someone used to being on camera. "You're Amara Johnson." "Right. I'm a reporter for the Boston Chronicle. We'd like to interview you about yesterday's incident." Amara shook her head. "I have nothing to say." "Are you sure your story is getting attention? A black woman standing up to a powerful white CEO. That's big news." "It's not news. Ma'am, it's just a conversation at lunch." The reporter tried to say more, but Amara turned away. She didn't want to make the past into entertainment for others. When her shift ended and she left the cafe, it started to rain again. This time it was heavier, as if washing away the dust and gossip of the day. She walked home, her coat soaked, but her heart lighter. When she got home, she opened her old laptop. The screen was slow to boot, the last lines of code for the EH1 project still in the archive folder. She touched the file name, her palm trembling. She remembered every line of code, every character she had written 8 years ago, and the last night in the lab when the system had successfully run without anyone but her witness. She opened the window, letting in the cold wind. Outside, the city was still noisy, but to her, everything seemed to have stopped. She remembered Malik's words from last night. "If they ever took anything from you, I hope you take it back." and she knew her son was right. She turned on the desk lamp and took out a small USB drive from the drawer. In the yellow light, the letters EH1 engraved on the silver case reflected on the wall. She plugged it into the computer, and the screen displayed a series of familiar symbols. The code appeared, glowing brightly in the darkness of the room. The blue light from the screen reflected off her face, making Amara's eyes glow. Amid the rain outside, she sat there quiet, determined, and powerful. Tomorrow, she would act. But tonight, she just needed silence, because in that silence, she could hear her own heartbeat clear, strong, and more alive than ever before. 8 years ago, Boston had a morning like that. The sun wasn't shining, and a light mist hung over the glass buildings of Cambridge. In Luminar Quantum's small lab, the sound of laser scanners and the tapping of keyboards echoed constantly. Amara Johnson, then 32, stood in the middle of the bright white room, wearing a slightly chalky blouse. Her eyes filled with determination. Thousands of lines of code ran across the screen in front of her, reflecting off her eyes. A young engineer exclaimed, "Dr. Johnson, it worked. The qubit held its state for 9 milliseconds, the longest it's ever been." The group erupted. Amara let out a small laugh, a small one but brighter than any other light in the room. "Record all data," she said, her voice still calm. "We'll designate this version EH1. That day, she had no idea that that moment would be both the pinnacle and the beginning of the downfall of her life. That afternoon, she left the lab and went to see Ethan Cole, then Luminar Quantum's biggest investor. He sat in his glass office, light streaming through his impeccable suit, a confident smile on his face. "You did it, Amara. I told you. No one understands quantum systems like you do." She smiled and handed him the resulting file. "We need to file a patent before publishing. EH1 will be a turning point." Ethan nodded. "I'll take care of the paperwork. Trust me, this is the moment we change history." In the following days, Amara threw herself into work, barely sleeping. She was unaware that at the same time, Ethan was having private meetings with the board of Helios Systems, where he had previously worked. One evening, she received a text message from him. "Meet me at the Helios office tomorrow." Good news. She arrived on time, in a navy blue dress and her favorite scarf. But when the conference room door opened, she froze. Inside were 8 men in black suits. In the middle was Ethan. On the large screen behind them was the new logo Helios Quantum Division. Amara frowned slightly. "What is this?" Ethan stepped forward, his smile familiar, but this time colder. "Amara, I have good news for you. Helios has agreed to buy Luminar Quantum at 3 times its current valuation. Sell it." She could hardly believe her ears. "Ethan, it's my company. Ours. I don't want to sell it." "Amara, listen to me. This is a huge opportunity. Helios has global resources. The EH1 will be developed to a level you never imagined." She shook her head, taking a step back. "No, we don't need them. Luminar was born to be independent. If we sell it, I'll just be another name on their list." Ethan was silent for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. "The contract has been signed. I have transferred the intellectual property to Luminar, and Luminar now belongs to Helios, which means the EH1 too." "What did you say?" Ethan handed her the papers. "I signed on behalf of the company, using the power of attorney you signed 2 months ago." She took it and stared at it. Indeed. At the bottom of the page was her signature, a copy of the investment authorization. but she had no idea that it could be used to transfer the entire project. She felt her heart break. "You lied to me," she said, her voice shaky but clear. "No, Amara, I saved you. No one would invest in a company run by a black woman, no matter how good she was. The world is unfair, and I'm just helping you survive in it." She looked straight at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "If that exists, then you have killed my soul." She left the room, the door slamming, the sound echoing down the glass hallway. Ethan stood there, silent, his eyes cold as stone. A few weeks later, Luminar Quantum changed its name to Helios Quantum. Amara was demoted to technical advisor. All data, source code, and research reports were locked in internal systems. She no longer had access. She tried to appeal, writing to the Patent Commission, but no one took her side. In the eyes of investors, she was just a disgruntled employee. Tech magazines wrote about Ethan Cole, the man who took quantum AI to the edge. No one mentioned her. Then one day, she received a final letter from Helios's legal department. Under the confidentiality clause, you are not allowed to disclose any information related to the EH1 or Helios Systems quantum technology for 10 years. Any violation will be subject to legal action. That night, she returned to the small apartment. Malik, who was only 12 years old, ran out to greet her. "Mom, are you home early today?" She tried to smile, but tears were already welling up in her eyes. She held her son close, unable to say anything. For months afterward, she lived in a void between trust and hatred. She didn't want to hate Ethan, but she couldn't forget either. Sometimes she wondered if he ever remembered the nights they spent together discussing the future, or if it was all just part of the plan. One evening, she went to the old lab, now sealed. The door was locked, but she still had the key. The room was cold and dark. The machines were covered in dust. She turned on her flashlight and went to her desk. In the drawer was a USB stick, a copy of the EH1 test she'd saved, almost instinctively, before leaving. She picked it up and looked at the hand-engraved EH1 prototype. The light from the flashlight reflected off the silver case, so bright that she squinted. For the first time in months, she felt her heart beat again, not with anger, but with hope. She put it in her pocket and walked out of the room. Outside, it had begun to snow. Each flake that fell on her shoulder was a reminder that the past could not be buried forever. Years later, she became a waitress in a fancy restaurant where people like Ethan sat around, talking about innovation and technological ethics. Every time she heard it, she just smiled. Maybe because she knew the truth would come back. And now, seeing Ethan again, she knew the time had come. The Boston nights were longer than usual. On the small desk in her old apartment, the light from her laptop reflected off Amara's face, creating distinct shadows and light. She was still in her work clothes, a cup of cold tea beside her. On the screen, lines of EH1 code flashed like awakened memories. Her eyes no longer held the fatigue they once held, but a quiet concentration, as if she were facing herself 8 years ago. Outside, the car horns, the rain, and the wind from the avenue harmonized into a chaotic cacophony. But in Amara's mind, everything was strangely clear. Each line of symbols, each logical calculation appeared in her head like a natural flow of memory. She typed, paused, and then typed again, her hands shaking slightly, but the rhythm of her typing was as steady as her heartbeat. She's resurrecting the first version of EH1, the original, unmodified, uncommercialized version of Helios that helped her demonstrate that two qubits could remain entangled for longer than any previous model. What Ethan calls a pipe dream is the foundation for the technology Helios is stuck on. Near midnight, a message appeared on the screen. Simulation successful. She exhaled, her hands loosened, her eyes closed. A tear rolled slowly down her cheek, not from happiness, but from the pain that had finally found its way out. She picked up her phone and looked at her empty contacts. There was no one to call, except one name she hadn't heard from in a long time. Dr. Olivia Grant. She remembered Olivia's eyes at lunch that day, a look unlike the others. In them, she saw suspicion mixed with respect. Maybe Olivia was the only person in Helios fair enough to listen. She opened her email app. Her fingers hesitated for a few seconds, then typed Olivia. I don't want enemies. I just want the truth. EH1 was not a Helios product. If you believe in science more than power, come see me. Amara Johnson. She read it again, then pressed send. Outside, the rain stopped. The clouds parted, revealing a night sky dappled with city lights. Amara smiled, a tired but genuine smile. For the first time in years, she no longer felt helpless. The next morning, she went to work as usual. But the atmosphere in the restaurant was different. Many people recognized her, the waitress who took a stand against the billionaire. Some customers greeted her with admiration, others with curiosity, a little pity. She just smiled, without reacting. Charles approached, his voice low. Last night the papers reported that Helios lost another $200 million on the Q-Bridge project. They're in an emergency meeting. Amara nodded. I guess so. And you? Are you going to continue to be silent? She looked at him, her eyes deep and calm. Sometimes silence can be a form of strength, but not forever. The afternoon passed slowly. Near the end of her shift, the phone in her pocket buzzed a new email. From Dr. Olivia Grant. Just one line, I want to see you. 9 p.m. Helios Research Lab. Amara stared at the words for a long time, not exactly in surprise. She knew this was coming. She just hadn't expected it to come so soon. That evening, the city was shrouded in thick fog. Amara, wearing an old coat and a woolen cap, stepped out of the subway near downtown. The Helios Systems building loomed tall in the darkness, its glass windows reflecting a cold blue-white light. She stopped, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The security guard recognized her, looked confused, but didn't stop her. Perhaps they had been notified. The elevator took her to the 32nd floor, the quantum research floor, the place she had once called her second home. The door opened. The smell of ozone and the hum of computers filled the air. Dr. Olivia was standing next to the hologram data board, her hair tied back, her face tired, but her eyes still bright. When she saw Amara, she was silent for a moment and then said softly, I didn't expect you to actually come. I didn't expect you to email, Amara replied. The two of them looked at each other. A long silence. Finally, Olivia stepped closer and placed the file on the table. I looked at the EH1 file in the system. Your name wasn't there, but the way the code was written, the syntax, the structure, the way the variables were set, was exactly what you said that day. I was suspicious. Are you sure? Now Amara asked. Olivia nodded slightly. Helios used the entire EH1 platform as the basis for the Q-Bridge, but no one understood how it worked. They just copied something without knowing its origin. And now it's falling apart. Amara looked around the room. Every machine, every circuit board, every cold tube was like a sealed memory. I want to fix it, not for them, but to prove that the EH1 was right. Olivia was surprised. You want to help them. After all they did to you, not to help, to take back what is mine. Olivia looked at her eyes wide. There was another moment of silence. Then she said softly, I can arrange for you to come into the lab tonight. No one will know. Amara nodded slightly. Just 2 hours. When Olivia left to open access, Amara stood alone in the middle of the large room. On the table, the central control system displayed hundreds of red error lines. She sat down, her hands on the keyboard. Her every movement was firm, natural, as if she had never left this place. A new window opened on the screen Q-Bridge Core System. She entered the access code, typing each character of EH1, a code that only she could remember. The system accepted the command. The light in the room changed color, from red to blue. The data started to run again. In that moment, time seemed to stop. All the sounds in the room seemed to disappear, leaving only the sound of her heartbeat. Her breathing mingled with the sound of typing on the keyboard, slow but steady. Suddenly the screen beeped. A message appeared. Quantum coherence stabilized 0.9. So, then 0.2, 0.0 submarine. The numbers increased. She chuckled. It was working. The ceiling lights flickered. The server sounds changed. The data began to match. The error lines disappeared. She completed the last command. Saved the file. The whole system ran smoothly for the first time in months. She looked up at the glass wall that reflected her face. The blue light from the screen made her eyes sparkle. She said softly, almost in a whisper, Hello again, EH1. When she left the lab, Olivia was waiting in the hallway. What did you do? Amara replied, her voice calm. I just fixed the problem they made. The only difference is I know what I'm doing. Olivia watched her as she entered the elevator. In that moment, she knew this woman was more than just a forgotten scientist. She was a flame the world tried to extinguish, but the more it tried to extinguish it, the brighter it burned. As the elevator doors closed, Amara stood still, watching the floor numbers descend. A small smile played on her lips, the smile of someone who knew history was about to be rewritten. Boston after midnight was as quiet as a body holding its breath. On Cambridge Avenue, the Helios Systems building stood tall in the thin mist, its glass windows reflecting the pale moonlight. The wind whistled through the trees, the occasional car sound echoing in a cold metallic sound. In the space, a small figure walked silently across the empty parking lot. It was Amara Johnson. She wore a long gray hooded coat. Holding the access card, Dr. Olivia Grant had sent her a few hours ago. When the security door scanned the card and made a small beep, her heart skipped a beat. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. No one was there, just the dim hallway lights and the steady hum of the air conditioner. The elevator took her to the 32nd floor. Each flashing number on the display reminded her of lost years. When the doors opened, the smell of ozone and the sound of dozens of servers mingled like the breathing of a sleeping monster. She stepped out, her rubber shoes making no sound. The central room was the same as before. Rows of refrigeration units, bright glass walls, data screens suspended in holograms. Everything felt both foreign and painfully familiar. She took off her gloves and placed the EH1 USB drive on the console. The lights flashed. The main screen lit up, asking for access. She entered the code Olivia had provided. The door opened. The Helios quantum core appeared, awash with red warning codes. She sat down, put her hands on the keyboard. Her 10 fingers began to move quickly, like a memorized piece of music. The letters appeared: stabilize, integrate, optimize. The system responded. The room temperature rose slightly. She adjusted the qubits, loading the EH1 structure into the central control area. Each part of the Helios system began to breathe again, as if awakened from a long sleep. She whispered to herself, her voice trembling slightly. No one can steal the soul of an idea. A beep sounded. Security alert. She glanced at the secondary monitor. It was coming from the Helios secondary server on the 28th floor. Someone was trying to get into the system. She quickly activated incognito mode, switching the connection to an internal channel known only to her. It was a secondary code line she had created years ago, for private testing. No one knew it existed, not even Ethan Cole. The screen displayed a message. Q-bridge error coherence threshold exceeded. She understood. That meant the system was responding. A huge amount of data was being released. The lights in the room flickered. The space was bathed in a cold blue light. Suddenly, the door opened. Amara turned around. Dr. Olivia Grant walked in, breathing heavily. Amara, something's wrong. The security system just detected an unauthorized access. Ethan is on his way. Amara kept her eyes on the screen. Just a few more minutes. I have to finish this. Olivia stepped forward, her voice urgent. If he finds you here, we'll all lose everything. She didn't reply, just kept typing. The last line of the EH1 was loading. The message on the screen read, Quantum coherence sustained 6.9 seconds. That number was far beyond anything Helios had ever achieved. Olivia's eyes widened. Oh my God, you did it. Amara smiled slightly. It wasn't me. It was EH1. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy. Even, sure. She recognized the rhythm. Ethan Cole. She pressed the final key combination. The system backed up all the data to the USB and automatically encrypted it. The lights in the room went half off. When the door opened, light from the hallway streamed in, illuminating Ethan's face. He stood there in a black suit, his silver hair reflecting the light, his eyes sharp as knives. You know, Amara said, her voice low and unwavering, the ozone smell in here is exactly the same as it was 8 years ago. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What are you doing here? Just correcting a mistake. He took a few steps forward. You have no authority. EH1 belongs to Helios. She turned her chair around and looked at him. Wrong. It belongs to the person who made it. And that person is sitting right in front of you. The air was thick. Olivia stepped back, her eyes worried. Ethan laughed, a deep, husky laugh. You always thought the world was fair. You were a genius. Amara, but you forget that here, ownership doesn't go to the smartest, it goes to the strongest. She stood up and stepped in front of him, only an arm's length away. If your strength comes from taking credit for others, then that is not strength. It is fear in disguise. Ethan raised his hand, signaling the security guard in the hallway. But just then, the lights in the room flickered, and the entire system automatically rebooted. The EH1 hologram appeared in midair, rotating slowly, emitting a pale blue light. Data was being transmitted across the Helios intranet. Olivia shouted, Amara, what did you just do? She looked up, her voice calm. I won't hide it anymore. EH1 needs to be seen, not just by Helios, but by the whole world. Ethan rushed to the control panel, trying to shut it down, but the system refused access. The screen read, "Primary access doctor, Amara Johnson." He froze, his face pale. She stepped back, the blue light catching on her curly hair. "You can take everything, Ethan, but you can never take its soul." The system projected data into the air, a simulation of the EH-1, a graph demonstrating quantum stability lasting nearly 7 seconds. A feat that science had thought impossible. Olivia whispered, "You just changed history." At that moment, the alarm sounded. Security rushed in. Olivia grabbed Amara's hand and pulled her out the back door. They ran down the hallway, which was streaked with red light. Amara still held the USB drive tightly in her hand, as if it were a part of her soul. They exited through the back hatch. The night wind whipped at their faces. In the distance, the Helios building glowed. The blue light of the EH-1 shone through the glass, like a beating heart in the heart of the city. Olivia stood panting, looking at Amara. "You know, you'll be hunted from now on." Amara nodded, smiling slightly. "If I'm no longer a ghost of the past, then they'll have something to fear." The night sky opened up, the clouds parting. The siren still blared in the distance, but inside, Amara was quiet. She knew a new chapter had begun, one that no one, not even Ethan, could control. Amara walked slowly down the deserted street, the wind blowing a few strands of wet hair. Each step, however small, carried the echo of someone reclaiming herself. The Boston dawn was unusual that day. A dim light filtered through the fog-shrouded buildings into the small apartment where Amara sat by the window. The USB drive was still on the table, silvery, reflecting the first rays of sunlight. She hadn't slept all night. Images jumbled through her mind. Ethan's face paled as her name appeared on the system. Olivia's gasp in her ear, the alarm blaring across the 32nd floor. Everything played out like a movie that hadn't stopped. The phone rang. It was Charles. His voice trembled through the speaker. "Amara, you're in the news. The whole country is talking about you." She slowly turned on the TV. The screen displayed the CNN logo with large letters across it. Helios Systems Data Leak. Anonymous scientist behind EH-1 technology revealed. The reporter read, his voice clear. According to inside sources, the Helios quantum system has just been rebooted by the woman who was kicked out of the project 8 years ago. Her name is Amara Johnson. The image from the lab security camera flashed a woman in a gray coat, curly hair, standing in front of a glowing green screen. Her face was unclear, but enough for the world to recognize. Charles continued, "The media is looking for you everywhere. The police even came to the Metropolitan to question me." Amara asked softly, "What did you tell them?" "I said, I just know you are the best waitress I have ever had." She smiled, her voice warm. "Thank you, Charles." "That's enough." She hung up. On the table, the electronic newspaper was open. Each headline was a slash. Helios Systems crashes 32%. EH-1 copyright in doubt. Ethan Cole declines to comment. It all happened so fast. But Amara had no regrets. She knew that once the light was lit, the darkness would have to retreat, even if only a step. A knock on the door startled her. When she opened it, Olivia stood there, her coat long, her eyes dark but bright. "I have to see you," she said quickly, stepping in and closing the door. "Helios is trying to pin the blame on you. They say you stole data, hacked into the system." Ethan called a press conference this afternoon. Amara was silent. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You think I should hide? No," Olivia said quickly. "You should come out. You should tell your story. If you stay silent, they will rewrite it their way. The words made Amara look at her for a long time. Outside the window, the sun was slowly rising, its golden light a reminder. She took a deep breath. Then I won't hide any more. Olivia nodded. I will help you. I have data proving that EH1 was written before Helios acquired Luminar. If we publish it, the truth will be undeniable. They sat down together and opened their laptops. One by one, old archives appeared on the screen. The code dated May 14, 2017, with Amara's digital signature. The evidence was clear and undeniable. Olivia looked at her. Her voice choked. You've been keeping all this stuff all this time. Amara nodded slightly. I kept it, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew I would need it someday. In the afternoon, at Helios Systems headquarters, dozens of reporters gathered. Flashlights flashed continuously. On the podium, Ethan Cole stood before the microphone, his face solemn. Helios is cooperating with the investigation agency to clarify the incident. An unauthorized individual hacked into the internal system, causing a leak of confidential information. This action has caused serious damage to the company and may threaten national security. A reporter asked, can you confirm that the person in the video is Amara Johnson, former CEO of Luminar Quantum? Ethan paused for a few seconds, then said, we cannot confirm her identity yet. But if true, her actions are treasonous. The words were echoed across the media. But just an hour later, as the press conference was airing live, the screen behind Ethan changed channels. The EH1 logo appeared, and a familiar voice filled the hall. Amara Johnson's Helios did not invent the EH1. I wrote it 8 years ago, in this room, when my name was still on the door. The room was in an uproar. Ethan turned around, his face pale. Amara continued, her voice calm but resonant. I don't need fame. I just want the truth to be seen. Technology doesn't belong to the strong. It belongs to those who dare to dream, dare to create, dare to rise up after being buried. The image switched to the original EH1 video code, the digital signature clearly visible, created by Dr. Amara Johnson. The room was silent. Olivia stood backstage, her eyes welling with tears. Ethan, speechless. The news spread like wildfire. Twitter, Reddit, and science forums all shared the video. Millions watched it. Thousands of comments poured in. She's a stolen genius. Justice has finally spoken. A black woman did what the system feared. That night, Amara returned to the apartment. Malik waited, the broadcast still playing on the TV. He ran to hug his mother, tears falling on her shoulder. I knew you wouldn't let them win. She hugged her son tightly, her hands shaking slightly. It's not about winning or losing, son. It's about letting you know that silence has its limits. They sat looking out the window. The headlights of the cars stretched down the street, the sky slowly darkening. The city was still noisy, but Amara felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in 8 years, she felt free. Late in the evening, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. A deep male voice said, "This is Elijah Moore, Director of the National Innovation Foundation. We want to meet with you, not for an interview, but for collaboration. EH1 could usher in a new era of humane quantum computing, but only if the person who actually created it comes out on top." Amara was silent for a few seconds. Her eyes turned to the sky. Outside, the stars were beginning to appear, twinkling between the thin clouds. She smiled. I will come, but this time, no one will be left behind. After shutting down, She sat down and opened her laptop again. On the screen, the EH1 interface was still lit. She added one last line, dedicated to Malik. For every dream the world tried to silence. She lingered, watching the screen fade. Outside, Boston was fading into night. But for Amara, dawn had begun, not in the sky, but in her heart. 2 weeks had passed since the sensational press conference. Boston's rainy season was over, and the sky was unusually bright and clear. The trees along Longfellow Avenue were a soft yellow, swaying in the breeze like a breath of fresh air. On the campus of the newly established Quantum Research Institute, the first sign had been hung, the Amara Institute for Quantum Integrity. Amara watched from a distance, her hands in her coat pockets. Her curly hair blew lightly in the wind. There was no trace of fatigue on her face, only the serenity of someone who had just weathered a storm and was standing at dawn. Beside her, Dr. Olivia Grant smiled, holding a cup of coffee. What do you think? I think it's a beautiful name. Amara nodded slightly. Not because of me, because of integrity. Olivia looked at her, her voice sincere. You know, you made the whole industry take a look. Not just because of EH1, but because of the way you did it. No bitterness, no revenge, just telling the truth. She smiled, her eyes looking far away. I don't win by them losing. I only win when I can be myself again. From a distance, Malik ran up, wearing his Harvard College jacket. He was a grown man, his eyes filled with pride. Mom, they're interviewing outside. They want you to say a few words. She looked at her son and smiled. I will speak, but not for them. I will speak for the people out there who are afraid those who were silent, like me. She stepped onto a small platform set up in the middle of the courtyard. Cameras, reporters, and dozens of young students were waiting. As she took the microphone, a gentle breeze blew, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden next door. 8 years ago, she began, her voice low. I lost everything, an idea, a company, and the belief that justice existed in the world of science. I thought that by staying silent, time would heal. But the truth is, staying silent only deepens the wound. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. I'm not telling this to blame. I'm telling this because there are thousands like me people who were left out of the table because they didn't fit the mold. They didn't have the color, gender, or background that people wanted. But they had one thing: determination. Applause broke out, but she raised her hand slightly to stop. We don't need pity. We need opportunity. The Amara Institute will be that kind of place, a place where anyone with an idea is heard, whether they're a professor, a barista, or a waitress. The whole campus held its breath. In the front row, Olivia nodded slightly, her eyes brimming with tears. She continued, her voice soft but firm. The EH1 is more than just technology. It is a symbol that the truth can be buried, but not erased. If you believe in your work, believe in the value of human beings, sooner or later the light will find you. The deep sound echoed through the courtyard. As she stepped down, Malik hugged his mother and whispered, You just made the world listen. She smiled, squeezing his shoulder. It wasn't you. It was us. The ceremony ended, but the crowd was reluctant to leave. Online, the speech was shared millions of times. The hashtag #StandWithAmara went viral. Universities, research institutes, and even corporations began talking about scientific ethics, intellectual property, and inclusive innovation. A new dialogue was opened, and the one who started it was a forgotten woman. That evening, Amara sat alone in her new office. Soft light illuminated an old photograph on the wall, one of her in the Luminar Quantum Lab years ago. Beneath it, in small handwriting, Malik wrote, "You never stop shining." She stared for a long time. There was a light knock on the door. Olivia entered, placing an envelope on the table. "A letter from Helios Systems. Ethan wants to see you." Amara wasn't surprised. She took the envelope and opened it. Inside was only one handwritten line. "I was wrong." Beneath it was Ethan Cole's signature. She put the letter down on the table and said softly, "People only feel wrong when they lose power," Olivia asked softly. "Will you meet him?" "Perhaps," Amara said. "Not for forgiveness, but for closure." 2 days later, they met at a small cafe along the Charles River. No cameras, no lights, just two people who once shared a dream, now sitting across from each other like two pieces of broken glass. Ethan looked at her, his face much older. "You won." "Amara?" She shook her head. "I don't think so. I just took back what was mine." He was silent. "I used to think I did the right thing, that Helios could only survive that way. But I forgot. Existence without a soul is just an empty shell." Amara looked at him, her voice slow. "You are not the first to think that power is life, but I hope you will be the last to learn that true life lies in trust." Ethan bowed his head. There was a long silence. Finally, he said softly, "If I could go back, I wouldn't have signed that contract." She replied, "We can't go back, but we can do things differently from today." As she left the tavern, she turned to look at the river, reflecting the sunset. The water rippled with golden rays, spreading out like her name, Amara, meaning undying light. That evening, she returned to the Institute and stood in front of her new lab. Malik was there, with a group of young students testing the EH2, a successor to the EH1. She watched them work with great enthusiasm, feeling both peaceful and proud. Olivia stepped forward and asked softly, "What do you see?" She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I see light." Outside, Boston glowed at night. People streamed by. Cars streamed by. But high up in the Institute, the light from the lab remained on. It was more than just a light. It was a symbol of faith, of integrity, of people who stood up when the world told them to sit down. And there, Amara Johnson, the once forgotten woman who once waited tables in a bar where people despised her, now became a beacon of light for a generation. It was an early autumn morning in Boston, sunlight streaming through the glass windows of her new lab. Amara Johnson sat at her desk, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. Outside, red maple leaves were falling, each one lightly touching the glass roof. The city below was as bustling as ever, but in her heart, everything was strangely quiet. It's been months since the Amara Institute officially opened. Students come from all over, from prestigious schools to the slums of Detroit, Atlanta, New Orleans. They come not just to learn about quantum, but to learn to believe in themselves. On mornings like this, Amara sits quietly watching them through the glass, her eyes full of faith, her heart filled with pride and gratitude. Olivia walked in, carrying a stack of papers. Today's schedule is packed. 10 o'clock meeting with the donor group, 1 hour with the students, 3 hours interview with the Times. Amara chuckled. That still leaves an hour to breathe. Olivia sat down in the chair opposite her, looking at her fondly. "I remember the day you walked into Helios, in your Waitress uniform, and looked straight at Ethan Cole. Now you're here, with an entire institute named after you. How does it feel?" Amara sipped her coffee, her eyes distant. Not exactly a victory. More like a full circle. I'm not going back to the past, just standing at the point where the past and the future meet. She put down her coffee, opened a drawer, and took out an old photo she and Malik in their small apartment 8 years ago. They were both smiling brightly against the old kitchen and peeling walls. That day, I thought I had lost everything. But actually, that day, I found something I should never forget the reason I started. At noon, Malik stopped by the Institute. He was a sophomore now, almost as tall as his mother, his eyes as bright as the city lights at night. He carried a lunchbox and a smile. "Mom still forgets lunch." Amara smiled. "Taking it? Chicken sandwich again." "That's right. Real Boston flavor. My way." They both laughed. They sat by the window, watching the people below. Malik asked, "Do you ever think you'll forgive him?" Amara was quiet for a moment. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting that you can't change what happened. You can only choose not to let it define you. He nodded. "Then you win." As the afternoon wore on, a light rain fell over Boston. Droplets of water hit the glass, streaking down. Amara sat in the conference room, listening to a group of students present their new project, Project Harmony, inspired by the EH1 itself. "We don't just want to create technology," said a young, brown-skinned girl with an enthusiastic voice. "We want to create opportunities for communities that have never had access to technology." Amara smiled, her heart filled with emotion. She remembered herself 10 years ago, standing in her small lab, believing that science could change lives. As it turned out, that fire had never gone out. When the meeting ended, Olivia turned around. "You see, they are all the new Amara Johnsons." She nodded and said softly, "And it is my job to keep that flame alive." That evening, she drove along the Charles River. The city glowed in the night, its lights reflecting off the water like 1,000 falling stars. She stopped by the old bridge, where she had sat when she left Helios alone, in the cold night, with empty hands. Now, she was in the same spot, but the wind was less bitter, and there was a strange peace in her heart. She took a small piece of paper from her pocket, a letter to herself 8 years ago which she had never sent. The handwriting was scrawled. The ink faded. She read softly, "Amara, if tomorrow no one believes in you, still believe in the light within. It is weak, but it will guide you through the darkness." She folded it, smiling. You did it. Across the river, the Helios Systems building was still lit. She looked at it, no longer feeling hatred, just a part of the closed memory. People cannot live in darkness forever just because they are afraid of their own light. She returned to her car and turned on the radio. An old jazz song came on Autumn in New England, slow, warm, and just sad enough. She drove toward the Institute, where the lab lights were still on. Late at night, she wrote in her diary. The words appeared on the screen. Day 256. Since the Institute opened, today, I realized that the most important thing is not restoring EH1 or defeating Helios. It is seeing young faces believe in good things. I used to think that light was something I created, but in fact, it was just reflected from the people I met. She paused, took a slow breath, and then added one last line. When we stop running from the past, we see it as just a backdrop to the bigger picture of ourselves. The wind blew through the window. She looked up at the night sky, where the moon was peeking out from behind the clouds. Under the moonlight, her face was bright, gentle, and strong. Olivia walked in and whispered, "Are you still working?" Amara turned and smiled. "No, I was just writing a thank you note. For who? For Boston. For making me fall. and then get back up. The two of them silently looked out the window. Below, the crowd was still bustling, the lights moving like the heartbeat of the city. Olivia said softly, "Do you realize this city has changed since you appeared?" Amara smiled softly. "No, Boston is still the same. It's just that I see it with different eyes." When Olivia left, Amara stayed, touching the glass. Below, the Charles River shimmered like a silver ribbon. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Maya, my daughter, I did it." The wind blew softly, as if someone was answering from afar. In the wind. Amara smiled, the smile of someone who had finally found herself. Winter arrived earlier than usual in Boston. A light snow had begun to fall on the historic streets, flakes of pure white touching the glass of the lab where Amara Johnson worked every night. The only light was the blue glow of her computer screen and the scratching of her pen on her notebook. On the table, there was an unsent letter, a cream-colored envelope, handwritten to my younger self, to myself many years ago. Amara stopped, took a deep breath, and began writing. To the Amara of yesteryear, the girl who stood silently in the corner of the lab, watching people take her work out and sign it. She cried and thought her life was over. But Amara, she didn't know that at that very moment. Light began to grow in the darkness. She raised her head and looked around the room. On the wall was a photograph of the first batch of Amara students' young, hopeful faces, with bright eyes like hers. In the corner was a small painting by Malik that read, "Mother is a lighthouse." She smiled and continued writing. True light is quiet. It is patient, quietly shining, even when no one believes it exists. Maybe people will forget your name, forget what you did, but the important thing is that you must not forget yourself. Outside, the wind blew through the windows, carrying with it the distant sound of church bells. Winter in Boston always seemed both sad and beautiful, as if time slowed down to allow people to reflect on themselves. She stood up, put on her cloak, and stepped out onto the balcony. Below was the city glowing in the snow. Familiar streets, old buildings, places with painful pasts, now appeared peaceful as a painting. In the distance, the Charles River sparkled with lights. She remembered the night she had sat there, trembling, alone, her hands bleeding from clinging to her dreams. And now, in this same place, she stood tall, confident, with the belief that the light never goes out, as long as you keep walking toward it. There was a knock on the door. Malik walked in, 2 cups of hot cocoa in hand. Mommy's working late again. She smiled, taking the cup from him. Just writing a few lines. For the paper, no. For an old friend, my old self. Malik sat down in the chair opposite. He looked around the room, then asked, "Have you ever been afraid? When you started over, when you told the truth, when you faced everything Amara thought for a moment, then softly replied, 'Of course. Who isn't afraid?' But you know, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to keep going, even when you're scared." She looked at her son, her eyes gentle and deep. "And if there is one thing I have learned from all those years, it is there is nothing more precious than being true to yourself." Mother and child sat still, only hearing the sound of the wind outside and the smell of cocoa mixed with the warmth. Malik suddenly said, "My friends at school told me that many people started learning about quantum because of your story. They called you the woman who made science humane." She chuckled. "If your story makes anyone believe that they can start over no matter their age or status, then I'm happy, because that's what light really means to spread." A notification sounded on her laptop. A new email had arrived. She opened it, and it was an invitation from the United Nations speak at the Global Conference on Equity in Science and Innovation. She read slowly, then looked at her son. Malik smiled brightly. "Are you going, Mom?" "Of course," she replied, "but not to talk about the past. I'm going to talk about hope." A few weeks later, Geneva. The conference room was brightly lit. Hundreds of scientists, leaders, and young students from around the world were listening. When Amara took the stage, the room fell silent. She wore a simple black suit, held the microphone, her voice resounding slowly but firmly. "I used to be a waitress. I used to be forgotten. But it was during those days that I learned the greatest lesson. A person's value is not in their position, but in what they live for." A silence fell over the auditorium. "I lost my career, my reputation, and my faith," she continued. "But what I found back was even more precious. That's why I started. And today, I stand here, not to talk about my wounds, but to say any of us can be a light for others." She looked around, her eyes shining. Sometimes that light is weak, buried in prejudice, buried in fear, but it still exists. And if one black woman who stood behind a coffee counter can do it again, any of you can. The applause was thunderous. A few people stood. Then the whole hall rose, a long, overwhelming wave of applause. Amara bowed her head in thanks. In that moment, she knew the journey was over, but the light would continue. As she left the stage, she sent Olivia a short message. "We did it." Below was a small light bulb icon. That evening, she and Malik walked along Lake Geneva. A light snow fell, blanketing their shoulders. Malik whispered, "Mom, I think Maya is smiling up there." She nodded, looking up at the starry night sky. "I think so, too." They stopped by the lake. The wind was cold, but the lights of the city reflected on the water like 1,000 candles. Amara held her son's hand and spoke softly, as if sending a message to all who would hear this story. Sometimes, light doesn't come from the sun. It comes from ordinary people who dare to choose the right thing when everything else is wrong. No matter how dark the world gets, as long as there is one person who believes, the light will never go out. She smiled. Malik held his mother's hand tighter. They stood there, in the middle of winter, in the stillness where the light and the snow met cold, warm and breathtakingly beautiful. In Boston, people still tell the story of the woman who was once denied service and became a symbol of courage. A story not just about science or justice, but about humanity and the belief that, no matter who you are, you can light up the world. And so, Amara Johnson's story ends, not with applause, but with peace of mind, because she knows the light she found will never go out. Amara Johnson's story is not just one woman's journey of overcoming trauma, but a mirror for countless others in this life. It reminds us that, no matter how judged, overlooked, or forgotten, a person's true worth is never determined by their status or title. It's determined by how they choose to respond to adversity. In this noisy and hurried world, that story makes us stop for a moment and ask ourselves, if it were me, when I was rejected, would I be calm enough to move on and choose light over hatred? The message Amara left behind was simple, yet profound. Live with integrity, courage, and kindness, because true light does not come from fame, but from faith and kindness. Wherever you are, whatever you do, as long as you continue to believe in goodness, you are lighting a small light in this world. Thank you for listening to this story. If you feel moved or find a part of yourself in Amara, please leave a like. Share this video with your loved ones, and subscribe to the channel to continue our journey of telling stories of healing and inspiration. Light, sometimes, just needs to be shared to spread forever.